Hey everyone, welcome to Monkey Business. The movie we're discussing today is all centered around a big reveal, so if you don't want that spoiled for you, you should go check out Scream and come back once you've experienced it for yourself. We hope that you enjoy the podcast. Hey everyone, and welcome to Monkey Business. Thanks for joining us today. I am joined by my co-hosts, as always, Warren,
How's it going?
going good, and Will.
What's up, everybody?
All right, and today we have decided to dive into a horror movie, our first of the podcast. Something we'll do semi-infrequently. I'm kind of getting the feeling, but I enjoyed this one.
Yeah, wait a second. This is our second horror movie.
Oh,
Nope
nope.
was the first one.
Yeah. We'll get into that. We'll get into what a horror movie is,
Okay,
I think,
okay.
hopefully. But we talked about Scream from 1996, directed by Wes Craven. And this is a fairly modern horror movie. It tells the story of a whole slew of characters, and it centers on Sidney Prescott, a high schooler who lives in the town of Woodsboro, pretty sure, right?
Yes.
It's
But
a disc golf
California.
reference. Yep. Yeah. Woodsboro, California. And it opens with one of the classmates and the classmate's boyfriend getting killed at their house while their parents are out. And this throws the town and the high school especially into a panic. And rumors start, and it's official that there's a serial killer going around. This affects Sydney particularly because the fact that her mom was murdered a while ago, and her mom's killer was never confirmed, although there was an arrest. And so Sydney starts to grapple with these things and starts to worry a little bit more. Sydney, her boyfriend, a deputy, I'm pretty sure, a cameraman, a news reporter, and a video store employee all try to get to the bottom of what's going on. And more importantly, they try to get out of this week alive. So if you guys are ready, we'll jump into it.
Let's do it.
All right. Initial thoughts, I guess. Let's start with how did it affect you guys? You scared at all? Or what'd you think of the tone? How did it try to weave itself around?
It was very 90s.
Yes,
Take that how you will.
agreed.
Uh Jump scares always get me, man. I'm a
Yeah.
scaredy cat. I'm very open about it, but I love a good horror movie. So a couple of times when things would just jump out at you or the anxious music would start to show up and play in the background, really enjoyed it. Really gave me the shivers a little bit. And yeah, overall, a very fun, enjoyable 90s viewing experience.
I actually thought it was a little weird where I was expecting music and they just didn't have any background music. Did either of you notice that?
Not particularly, no. I can't say I did. I mostly noticed that they also tried to add the air of anxiety to the daylight, where a lot of horror movies, if they're super cheesy and super tropey, will just try to have everything at night because it makes everything scarier. But this one adds that level of fear to, is the killer here in the school? Is the killer outside your house in the broad daylight? Was that creak someone who's actually there? Or is it just the house settling? Because if you had certain sounds and certain noises in another movie that wasn't a horror movie, you wouldn't think twice about it. But here you do think twice about it because they set forward the precedent of you never know when this masked killer is going to appear to attack someone.
Yeah. Very 90s is a really good way to describe it. It's definitely leans into its campy side. It feels playful, honestly, much more so than most slashers, which are always, I mean, not always, but typically they take themselves very, very seriously. A lot of times this works, a lot of times this leads to the point. It's kind of like they go over the edge and it becomes goofy. This one didn't really feel goofy. It felt the other end of that. It felt intentionally silly. But there was in terms of jump scares, as you were saying, Will, I thought pretty much every jump scare in this was pretty well done. Even the fake out ones. They knew when to use music, when not to use music. The titular villain, the costume, the mask, it was all pretty well done. Decent jump outs, decent reveals.
Does that count as being a villain in the title if the title is Scream? I don't know if that really counts.
What doesn't count as a villain, huh?
Because the villain's name isn't Scream.
His name isn't Scream. No.
So
That's just
he's just the villain.
yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. I already forgot
I
what
don't
you
know.
said.
All right, yeah. He's just the villain. I don't know. I thought he was a pretty good villain. I think the opening scene might be the best kill, honestly. I think it's just probably the scariest of all of them, and it's the one that, like, instantly you're just thrown into it, and then you have no context for anything. You have no context as of what this guy is going to do, how he's going to think, whether or not he's going to go through with things, and then there's the reveal of the boyfriend tied up in the chair outside, adds just another layer of tension to it, and then at the end, like, gutting her and hanging her from a tree is like that. That was the scariest thing in the movie for me, I think. That was some disturbing imagery there.
For me, I found it to be kind of the funnier part.
Really?
Because like this is where it
What?
sets forward tight like all the campiness, all the tropiness.
Hmm.
I found myself kind of grinning at the beginning, just
Okay.
really enjoying the cat and mouse play and stuff like that. Also, I find Drew Barrymore to be a very I don't really believe her when she's like, I'm in mortal danger. I don't. I believe everybody else in the movie, just not her. So it's very funny to me. And then just seeing poor Steve out there in the little chair. And then I was like, bro, how fast did this guy run over there, get all of his guts out, array them in such a very pretty manner, and then run away back to the shadows and then get inside the house? And they really do have, in my opinion, the villain go between supernatural speed
No. It's
and
because there's.
quiet.
Are we
And
spoiling this already?
so you think there's two every time?
Yeah. Not maybe not every time, but most of the times, yes.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
I think it's every time, except for when Billy is in jail. I think it's every time.
what about the principal death time?
At the very end, off screen.
No,
Oh, no,
no,
wait, that
no,
wasn't off
no,
screen. That
no,
wasn't off
the
screen.
principal's death where he literally
Yeah.
goes to his
Could have been
closet,
either way. It doesn't really
checks,
matter.
he opens it up and checks. There's nothing in there. He runs back to the door. We don't, and the door is always behind us. So unless the villain is just like Stu or Billy is just on the ground and then somersaults and closes himself in the closet, it's very much a supernatural. How did he get there? He's just a Navy SEAL in terms of his stealth for that kill. But then other times he's flopping around, he's jumping, he's falling, he's tripping, he can't stab these people correctly. I don't know, it felt very much like from time to time I really did believe, oh yeah, this is a punk 16 to 17-year-old kid, or
Yeah.
bro, there's a Navy SEAL who's doing all of this stuff. That's insane, man.
Can you imagine if Wilbur in Casey's shoes answers the phone and he starts cracking up?
Bro,
laughing?
I would lose it. It would be the funniest thing. Don't hang up on me. Then you just don't pick up.
I think I'm definitely with Carter on this one. That like the first scene is by far the best.
That's really fair. I enjoyed it just with a completely different set of emotions.
Hmm.
But I still
fair.
thought it was very well done. I
Maybe.
liked the popcorn going off
Hmm.
and how it's a time before caller ID, so she just thinks it's some prank. I was like, oh, that voice thing's kind of fun. Even Sid says, like, hey, that voice thing you do is kind of sexy. It's just, and then he's like, I want to know what it's like to gut your insides. And then the whole movie just changes tones, and it's hilarious. It's so funny.
Yeah, I'm not saying the first scene isn't funny. There's comedy there. It's it's a little miniature of the entire movie in itself. You got your frightening stuff and you got your comedy in there, and it's balanced pretty well. I think overall it leans into the comedy. I don't want to say too much because it works, but it does take away some of the fear for me.
Mhm.
Definitely.
It's a very fast movie. It's burning rubber the entire time, and it doesn't have a lot of time to sit and like really build tension in the way that it's like some of my favorite horror movies do. I only say that just because I don't know if I expected a little bit more out of it, but I don't know that I expected what I got, which is totally fine, but it wasn't nearly as scary as I thought it was going to be
Yeah, so we'll probably.
overall.
I'm sure we'll talk about this more later, but I would go so far as to say that that's part of its fatal flaw.
Hmm.
Just saying. What do you think, Will?
It's not the movie I expected. Very much a movie I enjoyed. Just I felt for Sid. I didn't want Sid to die at all.
Hmm.
I didn't really care if Tatum died. She was kind of obnoxious. I really wanted Billy and Stu to die. What I enjoyed the most in this movie, I think, is I'm pretty stupid. So I really didn't know who the killers were until they really revealed to you who they were at that final party. And even a little during the party, there are some clues in there. But overall, I didn't know. And it was very interesting to see how they eliminated suspects by killing off those characters. Like the principal's very weird, and he's just like,
Yeah.
kill him. Kenny the cameraman is in and out of areas from time to time, but then
Yep.
he's killed. Dewey, Deputy Dewey gives you some odd vibes here and there, and all that stuff, especially when he asks Gail Weathers to go on the walk with him, and I'm like, yo, is he the killer? But then he gets attacked, and I enjoyed that method of figuring out who the killers were, was just by killing the other weird people. But that meant that I wasn't really attached to some of the people who died because they were just creepy, weird characters. So when they got the knife or the gun, I was like, haha, that's funny. Like and thinking about how some of these deaths happened, right? Like the cameraman's death is the best part. Like, oh, can't catch Gail or Sid, so I guess I'll go back to the van and we're gonna take Kenny's body and we're gonna put that up on top of the camera van so that when she drives away, it's gonna come down on top and it's gonna be really, really funny. And it just seemed so. What were these idiots thinking? But then other times, genius plot design. I don't know. It felt inconsistent, but it felt very fun regardless. I don't hold it against the movie. It's just something I picked up on.
I think when they had time to think ahead is what you're talking about, the genius plot design stuff. That's when it worked like really well. But I think on the fly, when their plans didn't totally go as they wanted to, that's when they kind of started to slip up. That's when they kind of started to make the weird decisions and put people on top of the van and smash people in garage doors.
That was hilarious, dude. That
And
That's
was
how
gruesome.
so
That's
Like-
how
funny.
physics and garage doors work. Yeah.
Yeah, no, she would be totally fine. I really doubt that there's enough pressure in a garage door going up to snap a human body in half.
Somebody with their nuclear powered
I don't think
garage
so,
door.
no.
It's just, but then that's when I knew that who was it? Stu was one of the killers, was because he went and said, oh, I'm gonna go get another beer from the garage, and he went out, didn't say anything about Tatum, and I was like, oh, so Stu's one of them, I guess. Or he's just super drunk and didn't notice the dangling dead girlfriend body in the garage. A or B.
Yeah. So speaking of eliminating suspects, let's talk about red herrings and the many, many that are in this movie.
Can you define a red herring for me? Because I am very bad with definitions.
Yes, give me 2 seconds. So a red herring,
Some may say a rabbit trail.
no, very, very different things. A red herring is a clue or a piece of information that is intended to be misleading or distracting. That is the definition in terms of a mystery movie, as we're talking about right now.
So you're saying a red herring causes a rabbit trail.
No, rabbit trail is when you're talking about something and then you start to talk about something irrelevant to your topic.
Like this.
Yeah. So you caused the rabbit trail. But one thing I think this movie does pretty well is just keeps you guessing. It's not particularly scary, as we said, but it's kind of a thrill ride. It does a good job at setting up an entire spider web of characters and just having you have like no clue who is who. There's Sydney's dad who goes off in like the second scene of the movie. He's never heard from. That's a possibility. Like as you said, Kenny, the cameraman, Dewey, the police officer, is a huge suspect. I thought it was him for a while.
I thought it was the sheriff.
You did? The sheriff is another one because they pan down to his boots, and he's wearing the same
Well,
boots
when they
as
did that, I was like, okay, maybe it's not him.
Yeah, exactly. There are a ton where it's like they show something and you're like, that's too obvious. There's no way, right?
You have like Randy, again, the video store guy who knows everything about horror movies and plots
Yup.
and tropes and all this stuff. Who
Constantly talking
literally
about the tropes.
explains the plot to you as it's happening.
Yep.
Funniest, there are a lot of funny scenes in the movie, but I was
Mhm.
enjoying that one a lot where he's like, bro, if you do alcohol, if you have sex, any of this stuff, you're dead.
Dead.
You gotta be righteous. You gotta be holy. You can't do any of this sin stuff. And the other guys and stuff are there going, boo, that's a terrible
Uh-huh.
plot.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just the sheer amount of red herrings and of fake outs and reveals. Like, even if a good chunk of them don't land and make you say, yeah, that's not going to trick me. There's just so many that it just kind of makes your head spin. It just is overwhelming you. It's just constantly throwing stuff at you, and it's that much more difficult to actually put the pieces together and actually figure it out before it's revealed, I think, in my opinion. Like, I had no clue who it was until it
Same,
was
yeah,
revealed.
no idea. I definitely wouldn't have guessed two people
Yeah,
either.
yeah, me neither. That's impressive.
Warren?
Well, I think the reason why it's hard to figure out is because it's not very consistent with the characters. But we can get to that later.
Okay. To close out the whether or not it's scary, I mean, I really enjoyed it. It didn't scare me that much, but I think it's more exciting than it is scary. It's just a high school drama with a mystery, and then it's just a huge set piece at the end in this house.
There's no
And
terror.
yeah,
There's just fun jump scares, I guess.
pretty much,
Like
yeah.
there's fright, there's no terror.
Hmm.
If I'm making sense there.
Yeah, makes
But
sense to me.
but I'd agree. I didn't leave the movie and start checking around the
Haunted.
corner
Yeah.
for anything. I didn't get goosebumps. I was like, ah, that was funny.
Hmm.
That was really good. I got a few jump scares out of that and a really solid, well thought together meta horror movie.
Yeah, it's a good thrill ride. If you like slashers, this is one of the best.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's just exciting.
All right, so Warren, let's hop into you said the inconsistency of the villains. Do you mind going into that a little more?
Sure. So, where do we want to start? I think for the most part, it's how some of the time they seem to be quite smart with, like using the dad's phone, and they're very socially skilled, and they think things through, and they have all this stuff planned out. And then their big plan is to stab themselves before they set up the crime scene.
That was very much one of my wait a second.
Yeah.
What? Why? You're just gonna let yourselves become mortally wounded, possibly bleed out before the cops can get there to rescue you for the sake of the plot?
That's something that would have worked much better after everything was taken care of. And not only did they stab each other, they stabbed each other multiple times. Major
Bro, Stu got
arteries.
stabbed like 5 times, man.
Uh-huh.
Billy's just going ham on him. Yeah, no, that was a very dumb point, and
Hmm.
it did feel as though that was 100% a premeditated thought too, not one of those spur of the moment things. So I don't really have any leniency in saying, oh, well, they were just stupid at this point. No, they thought about everything, and now time to die, I guess.
Yeah, agreed. It was dumb. It was
It really
it didn't
was.
work well. I
No.
mean, like, I guess like heat of the moment, they're just trying to remember everything they wanted to do. And they're like, oh, we gotta stab ourselves, right? We gotta cover it up. And because Sydney had called the cops, they were like, oh no, they could be here any minute. We gotta make sure that we're stabbed, you know?
No, they didn't call the cops until afterwards.
Yes, Sid didn't call the cops until after she left being in front of them. That's what makes it even
Yeah.
dumber.
Okay, I forgot.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hmm.
And then they knock Gale Weathers out instead of just shooting her.
Yeah.
And you can literally see
Well,
her
she had the
chest go
gun.
up and down.
Yeah,
and
and then
you
they
can see
left the gun
Billy's
with
chest
her.
go up, or not
Yeah.
Billy's, Dewey's chest go up and down as well. And I'm like, bro, just you obviously show you have no problems killing people. So just gut everyone, man. Just kill them all. Stop messing around. And just some of the convoluted ways which everything happens. Just especially Tatum's death, I felt was very stupid and sloppy. And what were there, like 4 nut shots in this movie? Like they get kicked or kneed or thrown stuff in the groin at least 4 or 5 times.
You mean while they're in the suit chasing people?
Yeah.
I I I don't know. I thought it worked. And
It was
especially they get
hilarious.
slammed with doors a lot,
Mm-hmm.
quite a bit in the face. But like I thought they were, just bumbling idiots,
True,
just
but then they go
16,
and sneak into the
17-year-olds that
principal's
were
office.
just dumb, which worked for me. It definitely contradicts with the, you think they're Navy SEALs, but I didn't mind the nut shots.
I mean, yeah, it was a little bit of comic relief, to see competent fighting against the bad guys, though.
Yeah.
I'll give it
Well,
that.
maybe more incompetence from the bad guys. Some of these guys were like
I'd
Bit of
also
both.
ready to
agree with
jump
that.
over
Yeah.
the.
I'd agree with both, but all the girls tend to get knives or something like that. Gail doesn't know what a safety is, but at least she gets the gun.
Hey,
No
she
one
gets it
really
right the
runs
second
into a
time.
fight. Yeah, she get well, and then she says she got it right the second time. To which, and then Randy says, "Oh, this is the part where he wakes up and there's another jump scare." And so when that jump scare happened, I didn't bat an eye. It didn't, like, nothing happened. My heart rate didn't go up at all. I was like, "Oh, yeah, there you go."
Well, I don't think you were supposed to. At that point, he's just deflating the tension, and then, Sydney's like, not in my movie, just to put the nail in the coffin and say I'm gonna live, I guess. I don't know.
But no, I do agree with the inconsistency of the killer's competency level. Also, their strength levels pretty impressive from time to time as well. What they're able to physically lift, because, like, I don't think
Yes.
Looking at Stu, I don't think he could physically lift Kenny onto the top of that van, because as Gail Weathers says, listen, Kenny, you're about 50 pounds overweight. When I say run, that means get your butt in gear and run.
Hey, well, maybe it's just one of the two of them who's constantly, getting tripped up or like tackled by these super scrawny kids.
Well, my money would be on Stu then, because during half of the time at that house, Billy just decides to lay upstairs and do nothing. He doesn't help Stu at all. Stu has to try and kill like 6 different people, and Billy's just upstairs lying in a bed covered in blood. Like, well,
That's one of my questions,
should be
though.
fun.
And maybe you guys caught something. Maybe I just completely missed it. Did they ever explain a real motive for why
Yeah.
they killed any of these people? Like,
Mhm.
why did they kill the principal? Like, some of these just made no sense.
They wanted school to be out, dude. No school.
Yay. Curfew. Oh,
I know they killed, or they were gonna kill the one girl because it was the anniversary of the mom's death, and so it would killing Sydney and the dad would be easy to cover up. And I guess it just goes back to the line that Stu said: watch a few movies and take a few notes. How hard can it be?
I understand why Billy holds a grudge against Sydney's
That's
family,
true. Yeah.
but all the other ones just make no sense.
Well, Carter, do you want to hop in? I've been talking for a little bit.
if you got an explanation, go for it.
So I think, Oren, I know you're gonna hate me. Carter,
Oh
you're gonna
boy.
love me.
Mhm.
But I kind of want to go back to a line that I don't have it exactly written down, but a line that a sheriff says in this movie, and is a lot like a line from a sheriff in a Coen's Brothers movie, called "No Country for Old Men," and it's when they've arrested Billy for the first time because of the phone, because he snuck into Sydney's house at the very beginning, right? And the phone drops out, and she's like, "The killer is him." And then she starts to put things together from there, because she's always right on that. The killer is Billy. He uses his one phone call and she's very smart. She works through everything. Love that part. But the Deputy Dewey, Tatum's brother, right, says to his chief officer, "Do you really think Billy did that?" To which the head officer, or the head sheriff, replies, "You say 20 years ago? Not a chance. But with today's youth, I couldn't tell you." And the Coen's Brothers movie, No Country for Old Men, has a line where it's like was it 20 or like 50 years ago? My dad didn't even carry a gun when he was going on the beat, walking around town down here. But now, oh yeah, you better believe that I carry a gun, and he would too now. And it's just one of those subtle pokes of the world's getting worse, and the kids these days aren't all right, and all this violence in movies and these video games are out here causing everybody to do sick things. And well, I figured that was one of the lines I pointed to for motive for Stu. Thoughts?
Well, they bring up like that's scarier when there isn't a motive. Like, we don't have a motive. And then they're like, well, we actually do have a motive. And they go through and explain their whole motive. So they kind
Only
of,
Billy though.
no, Stu says, what does Stu say? He gives a reason. I can't, it was something along the lines of like, he said like peer pressure or something.
Yeah, he said peer pressure. I'm very susceptible or something. And then Billy punches him. He was just trying to get out of it, I think, at that point, because he had been stabbed and was bleeding out.
But I guess that would just be me for motive, is just they wanted to, right? It's the some men just want to watch the world burn type concept.
But that didn't fit with their characters at all, in my opinion.
I thought if it was Stu because he seemed crazy, but that's just me.
Maybe with Stu, definitely not with Billy. Billy is very motivated in what he's doing.
Yeah, but I would point to the final scene of, well, then maybe Stu is the one who's really going on this murder rampage, and Billy's the one who's only out to get 3 people.
But Billy's the one doing
Maybe.
all the planning, it seems like. So,
Yeah. I think Billy
okay.
is, it's possible Billy's the only one who ever kills people, and Stu's
That's
just
very
the
possible,
bumbling
yeah.
idiot who just gets kicked and punched and slammed indoors,
Well, no, because
which
Stu
would be
has to
funny.
kill Kenny.
Yes,
'Cause
true.
Billy's just upstairs chilling, man. Just kicking
Not
back on the
necessarily.
bed.
Yeah, I mean, I guess he could have ran out, done some kills, and then got back in.
Comes back in and then crawls down the
No, 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 no,
stairs
because
covered in
no,
corn
because
syrup.
Billy,
Yeah,
like, Sydney's already out of the house by the time
yeah.
Kenny dies. So Billy could have just
Because
gotten
Sydney
up and
is
then
with
put on
Kenny,
the
jumps
costume.
into the van, and Kenny dies in place of Sydney.
Yeah.
Yeah, but then she runs into the house and then Billy comes out of the top. So it just seems as, again, it's this,
Was that the sequence of events? Okay.
yeah.
Well, he could have
Yeah, and then she
climbed
comes
back
out and
up
goes
to the
back in.
window.
Again, a very really type of,
Mm-hmm.
how complicated are they make? Do they have like grappling hooks or something that they're using for all this stuff? Or are they just super sneaky in these older houses in the
That's most horror movies for
1990s?
you, though, I think. The more you
Yeah,
think about it, the less
pretty
some
much.
of the stuff makes sense.
All right, that's fair. So I shall suspend belief and enjoy it in order to
No,
give it a
that's not what I
consistently
said.
higher rating.
No, always be critical. Always hates movies.
I mean, Warren, I am with you on this point. There are some major consistencies or inconsistencies, sorry.
Yeah, of course.
But
Yeah.
still enjoyed it though. Did you like, Warren? I'm interested. Did you like Randy's character, the video store guy?
I think I did. So obviously, this movie is about as meta as it gets, and he was a big proponent of that.
Agreed in full, yeah.
Basically, it seems like half the movie is references to other movies.
Yeah, opening scene was probably the best reference. I don't know how they bring it up, but the killer says, "You seen Nightmare on Elm Street?" And she says, "That's the one with the knives, right? The guy with who have knives 4 fingers, right?" He goes, "Yep." And she goes, "I really like the first one, but the other ones suck." And it's funny because Wes Craven, the director of this, directed the first one and none of the others. So it's a little dig. That's that's his meta touch on it.
Well, at the end, they even go into the fact that he, I guess with that in mind, he knows that this is going to get butchered too, because he says, well, everything's got to have a sequel. You got to
Hmm.
make a sequel. And what? There's a TV show out now. There were 4 or 5
Is
Scream
there?
movies.
Yeah, there
It's
are 5, including this one now.
Well, didn't he make the first four?
He did, yes,
which is hilarious.
a little bit.
He
So
became the very thing he sought to destroy.
I don't know. I'm very intrigued by the other ones. I've heard mixed things about them, but I might check him out. It like the fact that he committed that hard on him and went to make a second, a third, and a fourth means he either went crazy or he actually has some decent ideas. And they're made at, give me 1 second to check when the others are made. Because this was 1996. The second was 1997, the next year. The third was 2000. So that's a pretty tight window. But four was 2011. So that's a decent jump. So
And then five came out, what, last year?
yeah, and that wasn't him though.
Yeah, yeah.
So who knows? I mean, I won't be doing it anytime soon, but I think rewatching this would be pretty interesting, honestly, just to see now that you know the twist, and now you have everything laid out in front of you to see what lines up with what and which killer is doing which things at different times, trying to figure it out at least.
I think on a second watch through,
Yeah,
it's just going to be pure comedy to me.
same. But at the same time, it's exciting. The third act is good. I really commend them for killing as many people as they do, which is kind of not really rare in slasher movies, but it's rare to have a slasher movie set up this many characters and have, even if you aren't really invested in them, they do develop them all pretty well. They're not perfect characters, but they all have their good personalities. They're not there to die. And
The
yet they
principal
are
is
there
there
to
to
die.
die.
The principal
And
is there to die,
so
of course.
is Steve. Steve is also there to die.
Well, you have to have some characters that are there to die.
I think
But
they're pretty much all there to die. I don't think anyone's developed particularly well.
I didn't think Tatum was really there to die. I thought she'd kind of make it out.
I didn't think Dewey was gonna die. Also,
He doesn't die.
oh, he lives,
Yeah,
doesn't he?
he's on a stretcher at the very
He's
end
on
of
the
the film.
stretcher at the end, yeah.
Again, very stupid. You'd think he'd kill the cop.
Yeah. Well, he stabbed him in the back pretty hard and he fell over, so he never I mean the knife was all the way in.
No,
But
dude, it was only about like a 2 inches in or something like that.
Well,
That's
okay,
not that
no, it wasn't.
far. That's
Let's
fine.
let's be honest, not too much of a surprise given the terrible form that they had. They're like,
Yeah,
we just hold
and
it up here and then just stab straight
uh-huh.
forwards.
Yeah.
You get no range
And
holding a knife like
that wasn't
man.
Billy,
You
that was
gotta-
Stu. So he was the dumber of the two and he did the dumb thing. So
there we go.
You got a
Uh-huh.
problem, man. I put the gun down right here, man.
Yeah.
So funny. And then it's just gone. And then works a lot better with the safety off. Punches her. And they
then
were
leaves the
literally
gun
just
there.
trying to kill her a second ago. So why not just kill her now? It's a whole lot easier.
Or at least, take the gun.
No, they do.
But
just
she
gets-
has the gun. They have to get it from her first.
Yeah, they take it from her and they go
Wait,
back.
then how does she get the gun later?
It gets after
I thought they just left it with
Sid
her.
stabs Billy with the umbrella and he drops the gun.
Oh, okay.
Pretty sure.
Mm-hmm.
Does he have the gun then?
Billy has the gun the entire time after they take
Okay.
it back from Gale. Yes.
After he shoots, what's his name?
They don't shoot anybody in the final scene.
Yes, he does. I forgot his name. Billy shoots Randy. Randy.
No,
Randy
Randy
lives
Oh yeah, he shoots
But-
him in. Okay, yeah. Sorry.
in the shoulder.
Yep. And good on a movie for having a shoulder wound that wasn't gonna
Lethal.
mortally injure. Yeah, it's just like, yeah, it was a shoulder wound. It
Mhm.
hurts, but you'll be fine.
Mm-hmm. So, Will had mentioned No Country for Old Men. That's one of my favorite movies, and it opens with the sheriff, and he says, as Will was saying, some of the old-time sheriffs never even wore a gun. A lot of folks find that hard to believe. I always like to hear about the old-timers. Never missed a chance to do so. Can't help but wonder how they would have operated these times. There was this boy, and then he goes on talking about how there was someone he had to give capital punishment to, and then he talks about what the boy told him while he was like on trial essentially, and he said he told me that he'd been planning to kill somebody for about as long as he could remember. Said if they turned him out, he'd do it again. He said he knew he was going to hell. Said he'd be there in about 15 minutes. I don't know what to make of that. I surely don't. The crime you see now, it's hard to even take its measure. It's not that I'm afraid of it. I always knew you had to be willing to die to do this job, not to be glorious. But I don't want to push my chips forward and go out and meet something I don't understand. You can't say it's my job to fight it, but I don't know what it is anymore. More than that, I don't want to know. A man would have to put his soul at hazard. He would have to say, okay, I'll be part of this world. And that's a very poetic way of saying how, as someone, a lawman, essentially, grows older, he just gets more and more out of touch with the generation that's following him, and he gets more and more confused by the crimes that are taking place in the younger generation, which is something that's touched on here. A lot more campier and not as somber and not as much of a deconstruction. But in horror movies, especially, I mean, aside from like a few outliers, but like the slasher genre, it's especially is known for its The teenagers, college students, young adults going out somewhere and then just getting slaughtered. What do you guys make of that?
For me, I know one part of it has always revolved around the age range that sees horror films is a lot of times now the age range that gets slaughtered in the horror films, right? Opening scene of Jaws is a bunch of it's two kids that go down to go skinny dipping in the ocean and then they get chomped on, right? And what was one of the biggest demographics to go see that? Well, our age, right? Probably 18 to 25 in there and loved it, enjoyed it, had a great time with it because, it also promotes a partying air in there. It promotes promiscuity as well. And so you have these different aspects of teenage to adolescent adulthood reality that get thrown in there and they're used to allure in. Like, surely, I don't know if this is real or if this is true, but from what I've seen, surely horror is one of the most prevalent genres to have nudity in films, or at least some level of sexual promiscuity in it
It is.
during the viewing. Is it the number one genre?
I don't know if it's number one. I don't know if there's rankings on that that can be definitive, but it's up there.
Yeah, and so I guess it just brings in the crowds, and us, I guess, kids are more easily inclined to go see a cheap, fun scare film than our parents, right? Like, I can't tell you the last time my parents watched a horror film at all. So I think one part is definitely an appeal to the viewing audience.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this movie understands that. But I think you hit the nail on the head.
In general, younger characters are more believable and easier to kill as well. And more people get upset if they are. So that kind of fits this movie with shutting school down and everyone getting in a panic.
Yeah, because you're not killing, you're not going on a slaughter in an elderly home
Mhm.
or through an office complex. You're not going and slaughtering like middle or elementary school, right? Because that'd be way too crazy for film. But you're hitting that spot of a bunch of kid idiots not knowing what they're doing, having a great time, and really annoying everybody else on the block. So why not kill them?
hmm And that's something to think about, you know? It's like there there's the glamour there with the teenagers that like they're becoming adults. They're, like a lot of potential thrust on them, pressure thrust on them. They're like, oh, look, they have so much future ahead of them. But at the same time, oh, they're annoying. They're just teenagers. They're dumb. And so you can feel for them dying, but you also can be okay with them dying, which is a weird little mix that horror movies definitely capitalize on. But yeah, it's also a big money thing, like you said, Will. It's that's the age range that goes and sees these movies, and that's the age range that will spend money on these movies, and so that's the age range they stick in these movies. Horror movies are some of the cheapest to make in terms of actual studio movies. They're some of the cheapest, and they always like I don't want to say always. It's rare they don't make their money back, especially in the 90s. This was like horror was the and 70s, 80s. That was the thing to go to. It was, that cheap profit that studios were chasing.
I don't know if this is in it for you guys as well, but there is always something to seeing someone who is 100% certified a worse person than you, right? So you can go to a horror movie and go, well, I mean, I've got my flaws, but I'm not that guy. They are they're very relatable to the last girl, right? But they're not, as we tell ourselves, they're not as relatable to the murderer or the killer, right? They're so other. It's definitely something I couldn't be. Whereas sometimes when movies make you think about, it's like, yo, could I be the villain? It's like, could I commit massive tax fraud? Or it's like, could I I don't know, drive away from a hit and run or something like that in a car accident? Or could I just, not know what to do with my life? And that's a very different genre to be fulfilled by other movies. But in horror, the bad guy is just some crazy psychopath who I would surely never become. And it's so far in a fantastical realm of who I think I could ever become, it's easy to disassociate from.
I guess on that point, did either of you guys want or think that they would kill Sydney at the end? Because for me, I think that's the only way that I would have liked the ending, which may sound a little strange, but
You would have liked it if you would have felt Sydney was in danger, or if Sydney actually died.
if she actually died.
Okay. I think that could have been a crazy way to subvert the genre, but I think that it would have made it a whole different movie. And so
Definitely.
yeah, personally, I never felt that she was in any danger at all.
I didn't know how much they would hurt her. I think I'll go with that. I think she was going to
Well, I
live.
mean, you know that she's in all the sequels. As we're
Well,
watching
I
watching it now.
didn't. I didn't
Yep.
actually. I knew nothing. I know nothing about the current Scream movies.
Oh,
The only
really?
person who I know is still alive was Courtney Cox. So I knew she doesn't die. But as for Sydney, to me, I was like, I could totally see them like shooting her in the head or something, but she's still alive, right? And in a coma for the sequel or something like that, or she totally gets stabbed horrendously. I didn't think she was gonna die, but I definitely didn't know how much they were gonna hurt her.
Part of the reason why I think it could have worked was because it just feels weird to leave the character alive when she's, in my opinion, the same character when the movie starts as when the movie ends. And so characters like that usually don't fare so well in movies like this.
Yeah, but that goes back to it's just you're just a final girl. It's not about developing characters. It's just about who's going to die and who's going to not. It plays
I agree,
with your
which
heart and
is
not with your head. It's just trying to get your heart racing, trying to build tension, and not really
yes,
getting you to think.
but it doesn't really play with your heart if it doesn't develop the characters at all. Because it reaches a point where, a few minutes into the movie, somebody dies and you're like, oh, was I supposed to be caring about that character? I already had forgotten who they were.
I think I'll agree with you. I already said it earlier. I didn't feel super attached to some of the characters who died, but I don't think that made me enjoy it any less. And I guess that just comes down to a difference of, I'm going to use the word enjoyment again, but a difference in how we view the movie or what we want from the movie. If a character dies or when a character dies in Saving Private Ryan, it's very emotional, especially once you get to that initial band, right? The initial group of brothers in that. But in this movie, when someone dies, it's supposed to be in the genre of it's death in a horror film. And the movie sets up for it. It's like, no, you don't care, but you came here to see some blood, guts, and someone screaming. And there you go. Yeah, got it.
So to make a quick comparison here, they made Scream the TV series in 2015, and it ran for a few years. And that all the deaths just matter so much more because you've had time to develop the characters and every death actually matters. And so maybe it's just personal taste, but I really enjoy it when the deaths actually matter so that you actually care about finding out who did it.
If you switch genres from horror to military, do you care that you don't know the backstory of every character who dies?
I mean, like if people like random guys are just dying in a battle?
Yes.
Backstory is a strange thing to compare across genre and even compare across movie because it's something that will work in some and not in others. Something that you need in some and not in others. But I mean, if you want to just make generalizations, not go for it. I'm not
Yeah.
condemning.
So I guess I'm just asking, in order for a death to feel warranted, do they always have to have a backstory? Or
No,
is it
not to be
okay to care
warranted,
about
but to care about it. Yeah. So like for example, in 1917, you have like at the final scene where, I forget the main character's name is, but he's like sprinting across the battlefield as people are dying all over the place because, guys are already running out to die, even though they're not supposed to be fighting in this battle. And bombs are dropping and people are getting shot over the place. And you don't really care about any of those characters. But his the soldier who's with him, I can't remember the character's name, but the soldier who's with him for like half the movie, who then dies as the plane attacks, that scene, like you just feel it so much more because this character has grown, he's developed, and we actually care about the character. And so it's not that you have to do that for every character, but if you want deaths to feel meaningful, you have to develop or make us care about the character in some way.
I guess to me, it comes down to what is the movie trying to show about what these deaths, like why does someone die, right? Not necessarily who that person was who died, but why did they die? And so in war movies, you have they died because it was a fight and it was for the greater good. In Saving Private Ryan, one of the main characters just says, it's like, well, I rationalized it in my head, right? It's just like, well, if I lose one man, I save 12. If I lose two men, I've saved 24 or something like that. And in the horror movie genre, for me, a death is to titulate the crowd, right? To enhance that fear factor. And so I don't need to know a lot about the character in order to understand that this death or that these deaths that are happening are a big deal, and that there is a serial killer at loose, right? And it's scary. It would be scary
But
if you had a serial killer at loose.
yeah, but because if it were real life and you're watching the news, I would agree. But because the movie has to do something to make you care about the characters to be invested in it, if they don't do that, then there's just a serial killer going on a spree. That they have to give you some reason to care about it and be invested in the movie. Otherwise, it's just like, it's just fiction. Who cares?
But then I guess for me, I'm invested in Sid living or dying. I'm not invested in everybody else.
I'm not.
Just Sid. Okay.
So maybe that's how we view it differently. But I will say that's kind of most of the horror genre in general. There's much less of a focus on character development and more of a focus on, your jump scares or your villain reveals or whatever.
Carter, you want to hop in on this?
I think you guys covered it.
Okay.
I don't really have much to say on it, I guess. I will watch anything. I really will watch anything and everything. And I've said it before, and I stand by it. I never regret watching a movie, really. And
Carter,
I
do you want some movie recommendations?
nope. But either I I love it, or I think it's pretty good and I still get something out of it, or I hate it and I know I'd still get something out of it if I don't like it, if I have a bad experience. But if there's one genre that just doesn't connect with me in the way that every other genre does, it's horror for some reason. And it's just because it's rare that a horror movie is really trying to push itself and really trying to shoot for the stars. And I think this one kind of does, but at the same time, it's still trapped in being a horror movie and having to satisfy its fans.
Yeah, I think in general, horror movies usually don't have something they're trying to say. It's more just, it's spooky season.
Or if they do, it's very simple, which is okay.
Yeah.
There are some very simple horror, like you guys haven't seen it, but X came out this year, and I really liked it. It it was just a slasher, pretty simple, really good movie. Pretty scary, actually, but nothing that really goes to the next level that you'll get from true masters of the craft, like Kubrick with The Shining, or it's risky to say Peele, but I'll almost say Peele with like Us or Nope. You get Hitchcock with Psycho, Carpenter, obviously, and people that like are just good filmmakers and then go into the horror movie genre instead of just studios making horror movies.
Well, I do think that these are horror. I think horror falls into the same trap that comedy does from time to time, especially with those who make it. As in, you're not going to get Oscars. You're not going to get Academy Awards or something like that. So I wouldn't be surprised if there was a large group of actors or directors who really thoroughly enjoy the horror genre, but they don't try to be anything other than what they are. This succeeds in being a meta-analysis of the horror film, genre, and it's very funny and easy to watch, in my opinion. Not all that terrifying, but it has the fright factor to it. But it's not going to get nodded. It's not going to get Best Actress. It's not going to, go to any of these film festivals, really. It might, but we're only really seeing that more so nowadays.
But that's totally fine. That's perfectly serviceable. And what it will get sometimes is a massive cult following, which is something that
Yep.
this movie has got. and movies like Halloween, which is the movie they play in this movie, and then
Hmm.
they have like a bunch of people sitting around
Yo,
talking about it.
they even have okay, did you guys catch it? There's also the janitor in the school whose name is Freddy. And he's dressed in the red and green sweater and he's wearing the cowboy hat or whatever it is. And it's when the principal is about to get murdered, he looks out in the hallway and there's the janitor there. He's like, Freddy, did you need anything? He's like, no, sir. It was the funniest part.
Pretty funny.
It was great. It loves, it's a horror movie that's designed to show a love for horror movies.
Hmm. And that's great if you can do it well, that's a million times better than trying to win an Oscar, than having that in mind. Because the Oscar bait movie is a genre in itself, and it's terrible. It's just embarrassing, man. It like when you make a film, your goal should never be to win an Oscar. That's not what you should set out to do. If you just want to make a horror movie, that's great. And that's great. It's just, I think it's just not on our wavelength, I guess.
Are horror and thriller the same genre? Are they in the same vein? Because I'd argue that thriller is very much applauded and enjoyed and built up on XXX level, but horror not so much. Do you guys agree with that, or do I need to clarify more?
I think thriller can be horror, but it's not necessarily. And horror can be thriller, but it's not necessarily. I think there's
Okay.
overlap, but they're two different things.
Yeah, I don't think you can ever clarify this debate
Yep.
that will just be going on forever, really. Like,
Okay.
what is a horror movie? What is a thriller movie? What happens if it's both? And
They're
there are
hard to
people
define.
like, yeah, they are hard to define. It's also, how do you define the word? And then how do you compare it to its other movies in its genre? Like, kind of horror movies that, like, when they get really good, like, people no longer want to call them horror movies because they don't want to associate it with the stigma of a horror movie. And so like, as I said, there will never be clarification on this. I mean, not trying to shoot you down, Will. If you have anything to say about it, please do.
No, I
But
was more open to discussion on it because honestly, I fall into the same vein as Warren's definition. There's some overlap. They are different, but I don't really know how they're quantified. But you see Silence of the Lambs being thrown out as the greatest horror movie of all time. And I'd argue it's not a horror movie, it's a thriller. But off of what definition? I don't have one. I just know that personally, that's what I would say it is more.
But
Even though
something
there is
can be
some
both.
gruesome stuff. Yeah, yes. I agree with that. But everyone's like, well, horror has won an Oscar, or horror has done major things. It's like, well, I call that a thriller. But for what reason, I don't. So I just was wondering if you guys had any clarification. But if it's really there is no end to the argument, then I am fine with that answer. It's
yeah, there is no end to
perfectly
the
okay.
argument. But Silence of the Lambs is the big one. It's like people go back and forth whether it's horror or thriller. Like, no one knows. But I don't think I'd call it a horror movie. However, it is the scariest movie I've ever seen, personally.
It's bonkers, bro.
Yeah.
That movie is insane.
Yep.
Well done, though.
Absolutely.
Incredibly
One of my
well
favorites.
done.
So good.
And Warren, in that one, you do care about the characters.
Yep. And that's the key.
Speaking of nobody knowing, does anybody know where these bedroom doors were manufactured? So there are several chase sequences where somebody like closes bedroom door or like kitchen door or bathroom door or whatever, and the guy in the mask is just banging at the door, just knocking on the door, waiting for them to get out. So I don't know if these doors were like made at Fort Knox or if they just like all you have to do is just kick down the door. These doors are so flimsy.
Bro, have you ever tried to kick down a door? Have you, Warren?
Michael has.
Yeah, I'm staring at a hole in my door right now.
Okay, but did the door come down?
There's a hole in the door.
Did the door come down?
It would have with a couple more punches.
So you're telling me that you wouldn't have had enough time then to leave your room? Because I know you have a door in your room that you could also leave out of.
Okay, but it takes more time than punching the door. Slowly knocking on the door.
True, but now we're back to the inconsistency of the genius that is Billy and Stu.
Anyways, let's move on.
Do you guys enjoy the meta genre?
Oh, that's a good point to bring up because I very much do not.
Okay. Carter?
It's hard to define because eh, you start, Will. I'm thinking.
I am incredibly easy entertained by cheap jokes and just a fun of bad humor that doesn't take too long to get to nowhere. So yeah, I do enjoy meta movies, so long as they're not trying to teach me something. If you're a meta movie and you're trying to bring home this deep point, you lost me. But if you're just trying to be dumb comedy for the most part, or tropey and enjoyable, oh yeah, I think it's great fun. It's definitely not a genre that I go out and say, this is a movie I'd recommend, or this is a film I'm not gonna go out here and say, oh yeah, you should watch Deadpool. It's a critical masterpiece. But if you like that style, oh yeah, I think it's great. But for me, it's just more of those turn off brain, disassociate from reality, have a little bit of fun for the next 2 hours and call it a day.
I do think meta works best in comedy.
Mm-hmm.
I think it works worst in comedy.
Really?
Yeah, it's hard because we can sit around and talk about it like we are right now. There's also a way to talk about it like we have to really define what meta is and what era of meta we are in because movies like The Matrix are meta, movies like Pulp Fiction are meta, and obviously movies like Deadpool could be considered meta. But there's the meta of the 80s and 90s, and even of like the 60s. Kubrick did it a few times with like Full Metal Jacket and Eyes Wide Shut, definitely. And then there's like the post meta of like Deadpool, and then there's these are just all buzzwords I'm throwing around from other podcasters who have talked about this before. But then you'll call it neo meta or meta meta, which would be like the atrocities that are
So
Free Guy
you're
and
saying
Bullet
neo meta
Train.
would be like Matrix?
No, Matrix is
I could see the
well,
newest Matrix
yeah,
be meta.
yeah, that would be yes, that is considered meta meta.
Well, I enjoy Free Guy. I'm gonna say that.
Hmm.
I haven't seen Bullet Train, but the Matrix one, straight trash, man. Movie's terrible. Don't watch it, audience. But okay, I see what you're saying. For me, I enjoy it the most in comedy. When
Hmm.
it when it's meta in another genre other than comedy, I'm gonna be completely honest, I don't pick up on it as quick.
Okay, but there's also the like you can't just say meta good or meta bad. There are meta stuff done well and there's meta stuff done poorly. Like South Park is extremely, extremely meta. Every single second of South Park could be considered meta, but it's done, in my opinion, very well. Rick and Morty is also very meta. That's done not very well, in my opinion. There's some funny parts of it. He turns himself new into a pickle. But overall, I don't think Rick and Morty is all that. But there's a difference between telling a joke, which is what I think South Park does, and pointing out the obvious, which is what stuff like Family Guy, Rick and Morty, and Deadpool especially do. They point to something and say, look, isn't that something that happens? And then they do it anyway. But because they've pointed it out, it's funny and it's excusable, right? Superhero landing. She does the superhero landing, and then you laugh. The joke is she does the superhero landing. In my opinion, that's not a joke, and I don't find that funny.
Did
If
you
you
enjoy it
do,
in this movie though?
that's all good. What?
Did you enjoy it in this movie though?
Not really. I thought
Okay.
Randy's probably my least favorite character in the movie.
Really? I
Yeah.
loved him, dude.
Yeah.
That's so funny.
Hmm.
All right, well then that just goes to show you the type of humor I like. Oh, you see, it's funny, man. He's explaining the movie now.
Yeah,
That's hilarious. And
it's
then
all
they let
good.
him live.
We all have our taste.
Exactly.
That's cool.
Some worse than others, of which I am chief.
For real,
Um,
for real.
that's really all I've got to say. I don't have any more topics other than that. You guys?
What do you think we would have thought of this if The year was 1996, and we just
That's
got
what I
back
was
from the
thinking
theater.
about.
Warren and I talked about this before the podcast just a little bit.
Hmm.
Warren, why don't you start with your thoughts?
Yeah, I think I would have liked it a lot more. Because, well,
Yeah.
for me, part of it was it's just so weird going back and weird's not the right word, but growing up with HD and Ultra HD and super high resolution, going back and watching a movie from the 90s, I don't do it that often. So just like first couple minutes, you're like, oh wow, this was like the highest resolution today. It's kind of crazy. But I definitely would have enjoyed it more if I'd seen it back then, just because I think,
It would have been more cutting edge.
yeah,
Yeah.
It wouldn't have been
for
parodied
sure.
to death, and it wouldn't have been just such a pop culture, I don't want to say icon, but it wouldn't have been
It'd been fresh.
extremely prevalent in iconography in our culture.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And it
watching
would have
it
been a blind
today,
side more than a, oh yeah, it's Scream.
watching it today, it almost feels like a history project,
A little bit.
Yeah. I think for me, if it was 1996, this would be probably in my top 10 movies of all time, especially if I saw it as like 16, 17 or something.
Yeah,
You just go in there with the rest of the high school to see this slasher film.
uh-huh.
Halloween, you haven't done it in 5 years, but I'm going out and buying the outfit because my cousin had this outfit growing up. Like he dressed up as it for Halloween one time, and I didn't know what it was, but now it's all this stuff. But yeah, no, this probably would have been in my top 10 films ever. But I think for me, the modern equivalent of a film I thoroughly enjoy, but I
Minions: The
don't
Rise
know.
of Gru.
No, but I don't know if I'd say if it's good or not. Is Tucker and Dale versus Evil?
I haven't
If you
seen
guys
it.
never seen it,
Okay.
bro, it's funny, man. I thoroughly enjoy it. It does not take itself as seriously as this movie takes it, but it's kind of another homage parody to the horror genre. And it would be my fun recommendation to follow Scream for the modern audience.
To piggyback off that, not to steal Tucker and
No, go
Dale's
for it.
thunder, but something I think just it's hard to say because without Scream, this wouldn't exist. But Shaun of the Dead, in my opinion, blows this out of the water. I think that
Shaun of the Dead is so good.
yeah, and it really is one of the funniest movies ever made, in my opinion. And Edgar Wright, since then, he's kind of fallen off. He's fallen off a little bit, plus L plus ratio, but he's still one of the funniest people alive, in my opinion. And he just has just so much energy as a filmmaker, and he just goes nuts every time he picks up a camera. And I love him for that. I think Shaun's his best movie still, and it just has all the horror imagery. It's got all the tropes, all the cliches, all the characters, all the stuff that you're looking for there, but it goes full throttle on comedy, and it just nails it.
There's a
And that's why I think it
brilliance
does
to it.
so well. And
Like
that's
they're really,
meta.
it's so smart.
Yes, it is.
And again, I wouldn't label that as meta because I'm too
It's meta.
dumb.
It's 100% meta.
But yeah, but it's like, see, when it's
The
not
title
in
in
just straight
itself is
comedy,
meta. Yeah.
I don't pick up on it as much. But that movie is, yeah, no, I'm with you. It's a fun ride with so many good tropes, so many good payoffs. And again, Nick Frost and Simon Pegg, such a great duo, as well
Yeah.
as so much chemistry together.
hmm
And you find yourself laughing, and then you're on borderline, and then you're just, your heart gets pulled as
Yeah.
well in the film. And oh man, it's great.
It is.
Yeah, no,
Such a satisfying ride, such a
Mhm.
fun conclusion.
Mhm.
And like you said, yeah, I know you're admitting it. You didn't pick up on it, but it is as meta as it gets.
Okay.
And it does it perfectly, in my opinion.
All right. So ratings?
Sure, let's get into it.
All right. Warren, you go first.
Do I have to go first?
Yes, you do, because you have to end on a high note with Cardi.
That's a good way to do it. Yeah. I don't know if ending on a high note would be Will or Carter though. Guess we'll find out.
Well, it's my movie, so I end it.
Yeah, of course.
All right.
So, like I said, I definitely would have enjoyed it more if I'd watched it when it came out, but obviously I was not alive then, so that was not possible. Yeah, I know, right? So
Will was alive then. He could have seen it.
Bro, just straight out the womb into
Uh-huh.
Screen Theater. Heck yeah.
So I give it a 4 out of 10. might sound a little bit harsh, but
Nah,
think that's-
You're joking, bro.
I think it's actually a pretty generous rating considering there's literally nothing that would ever make me want to watch it again, recommend it, or remember it.
fully expected that. I was expecting a 4 or 5. Yeah,
Wow,
that's
I thought
fair.
you'd be at least nice and give it a 6. Because
It was almost a 3.
You didn't really like Little Miss Sunshine, but you gave that a 6.
That did a lot of things well.
Dang. Okay, so for me, I'm gonna take Warren's score. I'm just gonna double it. Solid 8. Definitely one of the peaks of the genre that I've seen. And again, you don't really enter with anything. You don't really leave with anything. It's very fun. It's very well thought out. There are some pretty decent inconsistencies with the villain, but they can be not necessarily waved away, but glazed over as you're just kind of watching the romp unfold. So for me, yeah, solid 8 out of 10. On a rewatch, it will probably go down because it's more comedy than horror. But on first viewing, 8. Yeah. Carter?
Right there with you. I'm gonna give it an 8 out of 10. If I saw it in 96, I would have loved it, especially if I was younger. I don't think it would have been top 10 of all time, but I would have been I would have been very impressed. But it's unfortunate that that kind of brings the movie down for us, but I think it does tiny bit. But on rewatch, I'll feel the exact same. I think it will be 100% a comedy, but I think I'll just enjoy it all the more for that. Rating won't go up, but won't go down. Yeah, big fan of it. Very enjoyable. 8 out of 10.
All right. So before you all go, the next selection we're going to do is a movie that I've personally never seen, although the two of you might. And after the horrific debacle that was Thor: Love and Thunder, I refuse to believe that Taika Waititi can't direct movies. So it is my humble suggestion that we watch The Hunt for the Wilderpeople and discuss from there. I know nothing about it. It's been a movie
right.
I've had on my radar for a long time, and I'm really hoping for a good viewing. So yeah,
Alrighty.
see you next time, guys.
Sounds good.
Oh, we know Carter has to say the line.
He does indeed, Carter.
All right. Well, thanks for joining us, everyone. And until next time, we are the monkeys, and talking about movies is our business. See you around.